Six Flags Over Texas is one of the parks that will be gaining a new roller coaster next year, and this will be a first for America because we're finally getting a MACK Rides SuperSplash. The ride has been dubbed Aquaman Power Wave, and it'll be the park's 14th roller coaster, though they will tell you otherwise. They will say 15, but unfortunately a super loop is not a roller coaster. If you're familiar with Pulsar at Walibi, Belgium, this is pretty much the exact same thing. Top speed of 63 miles per hour, multiple launches, 90-degree angle, and that is reached on both towers, which are about 148 feet tall, and lastly we have a track length of over 700 feet. I don't think this ride should really come as a surprise to too many people. Supposedly this is the ride that was going to go to Six Flags Dubai, but they then moved it to Six Flags Over Texas when that project got canceled. It's definitely an interesting fit for this park. If you had asked me a few years ago what would be the next coaster Six Flags Over Texas would add, I wouldn't have guessed this. But I don't think it's a bad addition either. Six Flags Over Texas's current shuttle coaster is Mr. Freeze. At one point in time they did have a Boomerang, but this is the return of another shuttle coaster to the park, but this one's vastly different from Boomerang and is definitely different than Mr. Freeze. The main element being that this is a water ride. It's a roller coaster water ride combo. It's actually a really cool concept. I personally have not had an opportunity to experience this ride myself, but it's a very neat design, and technologically it's pretty advanced too. I mean, you have to realize how cool this is, that the ride will launch you backwards, and while you're up getting zero gravity at the top of this tower, the pool of water at the bottom will fill while you're suspended, and then while you're dropping, it'll be completely full so that it will create this massive splash as it goes through. So that pool of water does not have a lot of time to fill, but they're able to do it anyways. So that is very cool. It's also pretty different than the other water rides that we've seen from MACK Rides. If you've done Journey to Atlantis or Poseidon or Atlantica SuperSplash at Europa Park, I think you can get a kind of general idea of how the ride is going to feel in terms of forces. At least with the two water rides at Europa Park, they are not particularly forceful, so even though the ride does go fairly fast, I imagine they probably won't be accelerating you at a very fast rate. So I don't think this ride is ever meant to be intense. I think this is definitely more of a family ride. Even though it has a 90-degree spike, it's not going to be anywhere near as extreme as some of the current rides at Six Flags Over Texas. I think this might be a nice in-between ride for those kids trying to work their way up. And Six Flags Over Texas, being in Texas, it does get pretty hot there, so it will be nice that they will be receiving this ride, especially since the park's boat ride, formerly named Aquaman, is no longer around. We'll have this one to take its place. Also, I don't think anyone should be surprised that they're theming the ride to Aquaman. I mean, that was pretty much expected, right? That teal color works perfect with it. I think it'll be a visually impressive ride to watch, and I would definitely anticipate there being an area where people can stand off to the side and get soaked by the wave, so people will love that for sure. If there is a downside to this attraction, Pulsar at Walibi, Belgium features a turntable so they can load two vehicles at the same time. This ride does not have that, which means one boat operations. So when it's hot out, this ride is going to get a crazy long line. Capacity, I fully anticipate, will be an issue here. There's 20 riders per car. That's 4 across 5 different rows. Definitely some rows will get more wet than others, but I can imagine if you're sitting in the middle, you might not get soaked, and if you're spending like an hour or two waiting in line for this thing, I don't know, you might be kind of annoyed that you might not get that wet. Now you're probably wondering, why would Six Flags Over Texas not include this turntable? The answer is simple. It's an extra cost. Six Flags doesn't want to spend the money on it. In addition, I imagine it might also be a land issue. The space that they're fitting it in is kind of small, especially with how long this ride is. I'm not entirely sure how wide it is, but I would imagine that land definitely was an issue. So it does kind of make you wonder why maybe they didn't pick a Six Flags park with less attendance than Six Flags Over Texas, so that capacity wouldn't be as big of an issue. But I personally don't think they were thinking like that. I do think that the park they picked to receive this attraction was a good choice. I think this ride is so different from everything else there. The only other ride in the state that comes close is Journey to Atlantis, and that's in San Antonio, several hours south. One concern I do have with this, again, this is, I have not personally done Pulsar, so I don't know if this will end up being true or not, but one thing I am concerned about is re-rideability. Not just because of the capacity thing. I seriously wonder how many people are just going to want to ride this over and over again because you get so wet on it. I can't imagine that has people running back in line to do it again. I think for a lot of people it might be a one and done, but I feel like that's probably just the nature of the attraction. It's not something like New Texas Giant where you're like, that was great, let's go again. I think this was probably going to be one of those rides that you're like, oh, that was fun, I'm soaked. All right, what's next? But that doesn't mean this is a bad addition at all. Again, like I said, I think it's an interesting choice, but it's not a bad one. I think it'll probably be well received at the park. Only concern in his capacity. But that's going to do it for my analysis of Aquaman Power Wave, the MACK Rides SuperSplash debuting at Six Flags Over Texas in 2020. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with what I've said, if you're looking forward to this edition. Of course, you can stay tuned for more here at Coaster Studios. I'll see you guys next time.